Yes, I was conned into standing here at this time of the day. I thought I was going to be the graveyard after lunch slot where nobody was listening, but unfortunately we're not there. I just want to put one thing straight for starters. It says on there, I noticed it said ex-BBC senior manager or something. This is a total lie. I am to the BBC, was to the BBC, what the Chief Stoker was to the Titanic. No way was I senior or had anything really to do with running of the BBC. I also feel a bit of a fraud because I don't actually have anything to tell you because I don't have a journey. I've been nowhere, I've done nothing. I'm a CLLer. I'm still waiting at the bus stop. There's no journey to be had here. I was born at a very early age in Yorkshire. We couldn't afford to be ill. And we certainly couldn't afford anything we couldn't spell. I was one of those kids, we were never off school, never off work when I started working, didn't take holidays. Just the usual things. I was getting old, feeling a bit cranky and so on and so forth. I did all the wrong things. I rode large motorcycles, fell off occasionally. I played tennis. I skied a lot. So odd broken bones, but in general, don't do ill. I'm not an ill person. That's my marker. I'm not an ill person. Until one day in 2017, October, I'm told, I was reminded yesterday, it was Friday the 13th. And it was the usual story. I'm sure some of you were caught out the same way. You weren't lucky enough to dodge it. An eagle-eyed technician on another blood test for something else just picked it up. And sure enough, I got a phone call the following Monday morning from my local quack who never talks to me, let alone rings me up. And he went, we've got this thing on your blood test, and there's nothing to worry about. It'll just be something screwy that's happened. And you'll probably get a call from the hospital, go and have another blood test. So I thought, all right, and I went back to having my morning cup of tea, because this was at 9 o'clock. And about 7 minutes past 9, the tea was interrupted again when the phone rang, and it was the local hospital going, we'd like to see you for another blood test. And I went, oh, all right, thinking that's a bit odd. When would you like to see me? And they said, well, today would be good. And that's when the whole thing started to go slightly downhill. Anyway, I went for the blood test, and they said, hang around a bit and whatever, and then somebody will see you, and they made you fill in forms, gave you paper. And then very, very quickly, I found myself walking towards Block C. Didn't tell me what Block C was, and I walked towards Block C, and I was on my own, of course, because I'm a bloke, and blokes do this sort of stuff on their own. And walking towards Block C, and it said, oncology department above the door. And I go, right, this isn't going well at all so far this morning, isn't it? Anyway, I got to meet a guy who was a pleasant enough chap, and his approach was, here's a PC screen, and he turned it towards me. There's some red highlighted, and he went, I'm sure you know what you're looking at. Come back in a few days for some more tests, but it's leukemia. It looks like you've had it for at least 12 years, looking back at an old blood test. Oh, by the way, here's some other bits of paper. On the way out, get yourself some ultrasound tests and some x-rays and all the rest and so on and so forth. So I went home and I started planning the funeral, as you do. It was going to be a big event. There was the Abbey to book. There was a fly past, and the BBMF takes a lot of organising. And there's a motorcycle ride past, and all the choirs, all that stuff was whatever. I told Wendy over there, and she insisted that I wasn't going the next time on my own. So by the time we went back the next time, I went with Wendy. The next meeting, it was a different consultant. Again, he was very pleasant. I won't tell you the hospital, in case some of you got to go there. He wasn't terribly enlightening either. We got a few questions to ask, but we didn't get any answers, except that in this case, it was CLL, and I was on watch and wait. Sorry, Sparky. It's watch and wait. And his final comment was, well, it's okay, because you've really got a mildly friendly form of leukemia, which didn't go down that well. I was going, well, whatever. I decided, usual man thing again, I wasn't really going to engage. I just put my head in the sand and went, I don't do ill. I'm not ill. This is some sort of terrible mistake, and I'll just ignore it. The only thing I Googled was that my life expectancy after diagnosis was 10 years, because that's what it said at the time. Being that I'd had it 12 years, this wasn't looking good, was it? And the other thing that stuck in my mind, and it's the only thing I looked up on Google, was somebody quoted on there that having CLL was like being a grenade with the pin already pulled out. I thought, yeah, okay, that's good to go then, aren't we? Fortunately, though, Wendy started researching. So she did the researching, and she started to tell me that Google was absolutely nonsense, and it was way out of date, and she started gradually assembling positive information, and the positive information was good. She also started not telling me the negative information, which is also very good. And then along the line, she discovered CLL support, and that opened the doors for all sorts of things. There was a whole community out there, and we picked up more and more information. We picked up information about trials, reading stuff from Brian Kaufman, all the fun things, just that there was a community out there and we're all going through the same things. But the things I really picked up at that point were, you're going to have to manage this yourself, which was good advice, that your primary care is probably going to be useless. And I have to say, and I'm sure looking around here, there's a lot of nods going on there, that is 100% true in my case. And that you're going to need a specialist. I had a bit of a standoff at the local primary care at my doctor's about getting access to a GP, because it was usual, no, you can have an appointment in 3 months, which is no use when you've got a chest infection, really. And eventually I buttonholed the practice manager and we had a bit of a contretemps. And he admitted that I could have his number and he would jump when I said I need somebody to jump, which was a wise move on reflection. In the meantime, I carried on at local hospital with haematologists. They were very nice, I have to say, but they were not really very forthcoming. And funny enough, somebody on the table this morning who's from a similar area had a similar experience at the same hospital, I suppose. So we started keeping my blood records with the help of CLL support stuff, and we started interpreting them. And it became very apparent very quickly that we knew probably more about it than my local practice manager at the GPs and so on and so forth. And at one meeting, as a parting gesture, the haematologist, just literally a parting gesture, he went, "Oh, your urea count's up, so here's a prescription, take this." So I went away and went to the chemist and they gave me allopurinol. And I got it home and I read the contraindications and I thought, do you know what? I think I'll give that one a miss. So I put it in the drawer and forgot all about it. It seemed like more of a problem than a solution at the time. So I just stayed on, the usual watch and wait and worry and kept on reading CLL support and so on and so forth. But in the meantime, the more we learned, the more things got explained. So my getting old syndrome weren't just getting old, they were actually all explicable once I knew I got CLL. And we were picking up all these things on the forum. So the debilitating fatigue, that, you've all been there, I'm sure, that sort of, I've just hit a brick wall and I will go and lie down and fall asleep for 2 hours because I'm not going to get a choice at the time. The colds that flatten you, you don't get a cold like everybody else, you just, whatever. I found, and this started many moons ago, I was increasingly intolerant to salads, to bread, to yeast, exposure to other people's germs. And one of the things that I'd always thought, and was confirmed latterly, was my thermostat's broken. My thermostat operates at lower temperature now than anybody else. So unless it's really, really cold, I'm very, very hot. So we go skiing, and everybody's skiing going, blimey, it's cold, and I've got my jacket undone, and I'm not wearing a shirt and whatever, and I'm still hot, so whatever. And just the fact that the world's a pretty toxic place if you've got CLL, really. The good news was, of course, my immune system was working, because all these things are factors that mean you're actually doing something, which is better than doing nothing. We picked up on the skin checking routine. I got a couple of patches, went to see a dermatologist, had them removed, everything fine. So the pinless grenade was really gradually learning to cope. And I still wasn't ill, which is great. And then one day I visited the GP for something else, and by accident saw a locum. And she had never heard of CLL. We had a little chat, and she went, "Oh, that's really interesting." Classic question, "Why aren't you seeing a specialist?" "Well, I don't know, how do I get to see a specialist?" And she went, "Well, do you know who the specialists are?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, presumably there's some in London." I said, "Well, there are." She said, "Anywhere else?" And I said, "Cambridge. It's easy for me to get to Cambridge." And at that moment, she literally sat at the keyboard, wrote the email, and within a week, I'd got an appointment to go and see Dr. George Follows up at Cambridge. And then the whole world changed. I got introduced to Adam Brooks, and going there, it suddenly all came together. Went up to see them. It was a very pleasant experience. He answered all the questions. Typical Adam Brooks patients, apparently, turned up with 2 pages questions. 40 minutes, he answered the lot, even the really stupid ones. He reassured me, immediately reassured me, which is what I'd never had until that point. He just said all the right things. I asked him stupid questions about, what about all this stuff about drinking green tea? To which he said, do you like green tea? And I said, no, I think it stinks. And he went, well, don't drink it then. Fine. What do you think of allopurinol? He went, what on earth are you giving you that for? Chuck it in the bin. Go, fine. He just has a really logical approach to life. But the thing that really put me on the road, he sort of got me in the room. He went, let's have a poke. Like they do, they poke you. And then he went, that's fine, you're fully mutated. And I went, really? Am I? How do you know? And he went, I've seen a lot of this. And I thought, right, somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. And it just made you feel that more secure, that somebody knew what they were doing. Very straightforward advice about things like inoculations, when you need vaccines and stuff. What to do when you get an infection, when to act. Don't leave it, just do stuff. So now, I've got a list of things that I've learned across the years, which for those of you just embarking on this, I've learnt the hard way, but it's surprising that all these things have come to pass. So now I only use cafes and restaurants that have a 5-star rating. I won't go in any of those filthy places anymore because it just makes me sick. It's fairly straightforward. I always ask, if I go into cafes and whatnot, I always ask for them to scald the cups out in boiling water. This has stopped me getting sick because every time I went out, I ended up getting diarrhea and horrible things and stuff. I return any food that's only lukewarm. If food arrives in a restaurant that it's lukewarm, I send it back and go, cook it properly for me, please. I'm a bit vulnerable to this stuff. I don't want to get ill. Same with dirty glasses. Send them back. This morning's classic, wearing a mask on the tube. It makes me feel better, and I don't get people coughing and spluttering all over me. Whether it works or not, I don't care, but it works in my head, and that's good enough for me. I stay away from infectious-looking people. One Christmas, I stayed away from the in-laws because one of my distant relative, it was a great ruse, had a live TB virus that he was using for another thingy. But anyway, my in-laws are quite a toxic environment. They're 90-odd, so they're 90-odd-year-olds don't see stuff that we see because touch surfaces and you think I better clean that before I do this sort of thing, all those things. So I'm still the lucky one, but I'm cautious. I still play tennis. I ride motorbikes. I do lots of other things people my age probably shouldn't do. I'm the lucky one. I'm still at the bus stop. I've been nowhere, but I've learned an awful lot. And just before I go, I'll leave you, because I've talked about the pinless grenade thing, and there is a sense of when you've first been diagnosed of going, oh my God, this is all going to end terribly. Just one very small story. Look, he's approaching from the right now. I told you I rode large motorbikes. I have quite an exotic Italian motorcycle. And many years ago, I was taking it apart on the workbench, and I got down through several layers and got the gearbox apart. So a lot of horsepower goes through one of those things. And I put my hand in, was fiddling around servicing, and there was just one part which was going wobble, 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 wobble. And the engineer in me went, that's not good. Something here is going to go dreadfully wrong when this goes. It could catapult me down the road, all the rest of it. And I worried about it for weeks. And eventually I thought, I need to do something. So I rang a guy called Phil Todd, who ran Phil Todd Motorcycles. And he raced them. He had a racing team that did all this stuff. So he did the racing team, and I rang him, and I described what had happened. And he went, right, I'll tell you what to do. And then he gave me very precise details, which I wrote down very carefully. He went, you've got 5 bolts for this. And I went, yeah. And he went, you do that, and then do that, make sure that gasket's all right. Did the whole thing. Took about half an hour. And then he went, so that's it. And I said to him, but Phil, all you've told me to do is put it back together. And he went, yes. And I went, why? And he went, just get on it and ride it. You'll know when it's going to let go. And I'm an expert. I've done it. I've done hundreds of these things. That was about 20 years ago. Can still ride the bike. But it was really good advice. The expert said, put the lid on it, forget about it, and get on with your life. And now I'm not a pinless grenade. I'm sort of that person who's put the lid on it for now and gone, George Follows will tell me when he's ready, when I need to do something. Until then, I'll get on with it. Thank you.